On this short video, I want to discuss the topic that has been extremely popular in Orthodox Jewish circles, and that is shurim, the sizes of various ancient fruits and other types of food that, of course, influence all kinds of halachot, Jewish laws. And I think in the last maybe 15 or more years, there has been a lot of new understanding added to this topic, different from the understanding that had been quite popular for quite a while. And all the main poskim, whether it's the Vilna Gaon, whether it's the Mishnah Brura, whether it's contemporary poskim, they all seem to follow a certain approach. And then all of a sudden, a new approach was introduced. In a way, I would compare it to non-Euclidean geometry. More or less in the same time period, three different people all of a sudden came out with an idea that why do you have to have this fifth postulate? You could have a geometry, perfectly legitimate geometry on specific surface, for instance, that does not follow the fifth postulate. That you could only have one parallel line through a point. Right? If there's a line and a point, there's only one parallel line that you could draw through that point. That was the known fifth postulate that they, for a while, used to think that you could prove from the other ones. And then it turned out that no, absolutely not. It's in fact possible to have a geometry without this postulate. That there will be zero such lines, or on the contrary, more than one such line. Whatever the case may be, in Jewish circles also there are sometimes examples of this, not very commonly, but sometimes, when a completely new understanding emerges. Really, the fact is that, as opposed to, of course, mathematics, which is in constant progress, in Jewish circles, it's more of a question of understanding what was meant by the sages of the Talmud, for instance, or the early sages, the Rishonim. So it's not a completely new understanding. It's rather rediscovering something that was maybe lost for a while. But it's still a very great progress that something that was not known all of a sudden becomes known, possibly. At least a possibility is offered. Of course, the proofs usually in halacha are not as 100% proofs as in mathematics. In mathematics, there are proofs that are just proofs. In halacha, of course, there are what they call rayot, meaning it's also can be translated as proofs, but they're not full proofs. Just as it is in all other sciences, by the way, except for mathematics. In physics, in chemistry, all the things that people can conclude based on the evidence they know, of course, can later be overturned if there's more evidence. So I wouldn't say it's 100% proofs, but it's a very interesting idea, and that's what I want to share with you for those who haven't heard it yet. So we'll start from the general approach that is well known. And that is, of course, most of the shiurim, most of the sizes that I mentioned in halachic works, as the Talmud clearly states, are kezait. Kezait means like an aleph. It's meant, what is meant is an average, aleph size. Now, how to count an average is a separate issue. There are all kinds of different averages, right? Mean, medium. We're not going to go into this. We'll just assume that, there is a way to reasonably assume, reasonably estimate what an average size of an aleph is. The problem is that many of our Rishonim lived in places where they had no olives. In Europe, the transportation of food was not as simple, of course, as today. And in northern France, in Germany, and later the Eastern European countries, there were no olives. And they used, of course, their mind to try to estimate how much is an olive, how big is an olive, based on what we have in the Talmud. The Talmud is a huge work. It's humongous. It's much more than 1 million words in it. It's so big. It's a multi-volume work. Usually it's printed in many volumes. So there are all kinds of things that you could find in the Talmud and all kinds of interesting things you could learn from it. So one of the things they tried to learn is how big must have been an olive. And the Balei Tosafos, who lived in northern France and Germany, concluded that an olive is about the size of half an egg. Now, have you ever seen an olive that's the size half an egg? I'm sure you haven't. Neither have I. And there's a good reason for it, because there are no such olives. But again, if you try to estimate based on various Talmudic sugyas, you might arrive to this conclusion. And I'll explain in a moment how they arrived to this conclusion. Now, later on, of course, the later sages who were quoting them, many of them lived in places where they saw olives. And they had to conclude that there must be that the olives in the times of the Talmud and the Mishnah must have been much bigger than today. So an olive is much smaller today than it used to be. That was the necessary conclusion, because if olives used to be half an egg, and we'll explain in a moment why the Tosafos concluded that way, and we don't see such olives today, okay, so there used to be huge olives. But there was also another shita, another opinion, which is attributed to Rambam, that supposedly an olive is almost a third of an egg, slightly less than a third of an egg. And it turns out that Rambam actually didn't write that openly, mifurash. He never says that an olive is the size of a third of an egg, or less than a little bit less than the size of a third of an egg. What you can conclude from Rambam is that a fig is a third of an egg. That's absolutely true. It's in Hilchat Eruvin, comes out from Rambam that the size of a fig is 1/3 of the size of an egg. And also you could conclude from the Talmud that the size of an olive is smaller than the size of a fig. So it must be that according to Rambam, the size of an olive is smaller than a third of an egg. But how much smaller, we don't know. Maybe it's 10 times smaller than an egg, maybe it's just a little bit less than a third of an egg. It could be anything in between. All we can tell is that it's not as big as a third of an egg. So why did people assume that it must be very close to a third of an egg? The answer is that they assume that Rambam also learns the same way as the Tosafot. And therefore, whatever proofs Tosafot offered, even though Rambam doesn't hold that it's exactly half of an egg, but it must be pretty close to that size. So it can be a little bit less than a third of an egg, but not much less. So I'll explain right now what the proof Tosafot actually cites. Where did the Tosafot get this idea that an olive is a half of an egg? It turns out it's based on two different sugiyot, two different places in the Talmud. One place is in Tractate Yuma, that deals with Yom Kippur, and there it mentions, I think on the 80th page, that the Beit HaBliyah, the throat of ours, can hold only up to the size of an egg. Right? You could basically swallow an egg at once. There is a different tractate called Kritot, and there it seems to come out that you cannot at the same time break three different prohibitions. If you ate three different types of food, each of which you will be chayav on, like let's say chalev and something else, three different foods that each of them has a different prohibition. That cannot fit at the same time in your throat. You cannot eat 3 olives of non-kosher food. It's only 2 olives of non-kosher food you could eat. That's what what seems to come out from that part of the Talmud. Because all the sizes, like I said, almost all, not all, but almost all, are the size of an olive for all kinds of halachot. Whether it's a positive commandment like eating matzah on Pesach, we have to eat at night of Pesach. From Torah, we have to eat minat Torah, just 1 olive size. We eat more than that, but the minimal size is kezais. For prohibitions, in order for a person to be chayav, to deserve punishment for what he did, he has to eat, again, the size of an olive of prohibited foods, for instance, the type of fats, chalev that the Torah forbids, and things like that. Now, of course, it's forbidden to eat even less than that, but for that there is no punishment given. They punish a person only for eating, let's say, if it's chametz on Pesach, if it's chalev, the type of fats that's forbidden. It's only if it's the size of an olive. And of course, the main consequences of olive sizes, that's the most commonly used, is how much they have to eat to make a brocha after eating. Before eating, you make a brocha on any amount, but after eating, the blessing is only recited if you eat kezais size. So that's why it's important to know how much is kezais. What is the olive size? So the Tosafot learns that since in one tractate it says that you could only fit up to 2 zeitim, 2 olive sizes in the throat. In another place it says that you could fit up to an egg size in the throat. That means that 2 olives is an egg. Now, you can't really prove exactly that 2 olives is an egg, but at least you could prove that 3 olives would not fit where an egg fits. So, therefore, there's a question on Rambam. At any rate, Rambam's shita that the figs are a third of an egg and an olive is smaller than a fig, so there seems to be the case that 3 figs can fit, if 3 figs can fit into the size of an egg, which is the size that can fit into your throat on average, then that means for sure that 3 olives can fit there. So the answer the Gra provides that we're talking about 2 types of eggs, eggs with a shell and eggs without a shell. So when it says that you could swallow 1 egg size in your throat, that's an egg without a shell. But an egg with a shell you cannot really swallow in your throat, whereas 1/3 of an egg, that's the size of a fig, that's 1/3 of an egg including the shell. But at any rate, since the difference between an egg with a shell and without is not so huge, we have to conclude therefore that olives are very, very close to the size of 1/3 of an egg. They're just slightly smaller than figs. And that's why, like I said, usually the 2 shittot I mentioned, how big is an olive size, how big is Kezais, it's either a size of half an egg or a size of 1/3, close to 1/3 of an egg. Right? Rambam and Tosafot. The truth is there is a shita of Tosafot Harid, Rabbi Yeshaya Zitrani. There was such a sage, he lived in Italy. And of course in Italy they had lots of olives and he knew exactly what an olive looks like. And therefore he asked a question on Tractate Yuma in the same place. How could there be that the 3 olives won't fit where an egg can fit? Right? Olives are much smaller than an egg, maybe right? A 1/6 or an 1/8 of an egg, much, much smaller. So he answers that the truth is we're not talking about by volume. I mean, if you would take 3 different prohibited substances and mix them all into one, then a person would not actually break 3 Isurim by eating it, because each one is the minority of in that size. Each one will be bottled, would become negligible compared to the rest of the foods in there. So therefore, in order for a person to eat 3 different prohibited substances at once, he'd have to eat them kind of as 3 pieces together, not as one smooshed substance, but 3 pieces sitting next to each other. Like imagine, for instance, you put 3 olives next to each other, and then you try to draw a big circle around them. How big would be the circle? Much bigger than the total volume. The bowl that fits the 3 olives would be much bigger than the total volume of 3 olives, because there's a lot of empty space. I mean, on the flat surfaces, there's a mathematical question that is sometimes asked, all kinds of theorems about it. If you have 3 circles standing next to each other, what would be the size of a 4th circle that encircles the other 3? But it's much bigger than the other 3 at any rate, than the total area of these 3 circles. And by volume, it's even more. The difference is even more pronounced when it's in 3-dimensional space. To put 3 olives next to each other and then to try to draw a bowl around them, that would be quite a big bowl. So according to this, we don't really know if an olive is 1/3 of an egg or 1/4 of an egg or 1/5 of an egg. It's still a possibility. And therefore it must be that Rambam also held that way. Rambam nowhere says what the size of an olive is, but he certainly saw olives in his life, plenty. He lived in places where olives were quite common. So therefore he didn't have to say what an olive is. Kezais was a known size. He never says what an olive is. Obviously an average olive that every person can estimate by themselves. So to conclude, we come out with this interesting new idea that Rambam, Maimonides, and Tosafot Harid and many others, those who knew what olives' sizes are, actually had no problem with an olive being much less than 1/2 of an egg, or even 1/3 of an egg. And this whole idea of Rambam's shita being that it's 1/3 of an egg is based on a possibility to learn the Rambam in the light of Tosafot, which, by the way, is a big mistake in many other places too. It's well known that Rambam a lot of times had different shita, and we're already influenced and biased because we know what the Rashi and Tosafot say on the Talmud. So we try to explain Rambam's shita a lot of times in the light of those Ashkenazic Rishonim, and a lot of times it's simply incorrect. The problem is that Rambam didn't write his proofs in most cases, so we only have a what's called Mishnah Torah, a repetition of the Torah, the basically laws without any proofs. That's why Raivats argues with Rambam, saying that, look, you can't just write laws without proving it. How do we know what your logic was? But Rambam, by the way, admits in a letter that he would like to write a small commentary that explains his sources, but he never got to it. So there are commentators later that did write possibilities for where Rambam took his halachot. But a lot of times we don't really understand Rambam properly because we're already biased by having already made up our mind based on what we learned in the Gemara with interpretation of Rashi and the Tosafot, which is a different school. So a lot of times the Shitta of Rambam is very hard to understand. In this particular case, it became a kind of well-known fact. Almost every book in the last 200 years that quotes the size of an aleph by Rambam would say that it's close to a third of an egg. I wanted to mention one other interesting idea, and that is, even if the sizes of alephs used to be bigger than today, like I said, there's no proof for it whatsoever, and there are actually some proofs that it seems that alephs were always the same as today. But of course, there are different kinds of alephs, and some are a little bit bigger, some are a little bit smaller, but they were never half of an egg at any rate. But even if we assume that an aleph used to be bigger, it's not really provable that therefore we have to also today follow the alephs that used to exist. Because the whole point why these shiurim are given is that in every generation people will estimate based on what a shiur is. It seems that way actually from Jerusalem time, from Yerushalmi in Tractate Pia in the beginning and in Tractate Chagiga. It's hard to understand what exactly it's saying there, but it could be that that's what it's trying to say. And if that's what it's trying to say, it's not really surprising that even if the alephs used to be different, we don't have any source of how big the alephs were. We have no way to know. So the way the Torah is given, whether it's rabbinical laws or whether it's the biblical laws, they're all given for us to estimate based on the alephs we have today. So therefore, and that's by the way the Shitta is quoted in the name of Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, a student of the Vilna Gaon, that he was very mekel, very lenient with regards to the size of an aleph, and used to say it's like a teaspoon or something, something really small. Why would he consider that? Because it's assumed that he would consider that the old alephs have nothing to do with us. It doesn't matter if in the times of Chazal alephs were huge, even if it was true. The reason that the size of an aleph was given as the law is so that people estimate by the alephs they have. We have no other alephs except the ones we see with our eyes, so we have to go by the alephs that are common today. And supposedly even Chazon Ish, who is very strict with the larger shiurim as it's known, still with regards to this issue, he may have held like the Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, at least Mi'ikar Adin. Now, of course, none of what I said is a practical halacha. It's all theoretical discussions. In terms of practical halacha, it's already common and it's not so difficult to try to eat a size of a half an egg for all practical purposes, whether it's matzah on the night of Pesach, whether it's in order to be able to make brocha achrona, the blessing after eating. After all, half an egg is also not such a huge size. Maybe the corollary of what we're discussing is not to eat foods that are between the size of a common aleph today and the size of half an egg. Meaning not to end up in a situation where it's not clear whether you could make a brocha after eating. So at least some kind of food, you could eat different foods together. So if you're eating, let's say, some fish and then some meat, even if it's a little bit of each, we never eat meat and fish together, but let's say you ate a little bit of fish and quickly ate a little bit of meat, you'd be able to make a brocha as long as you ate exayat, which for the purposes of being strict would be half an egg size. And the same is true about any situation when it's both foods or both are liquids. When it's food and liquid, those do not mitzaref. And at any rate, the shur for liquids is different shur. It's called Rivi'it, which I'm not going to discuss in this lesson. But on a different lesson, I'm going to maybe bli neder discuss the sizes of volumes like Rivi'it and egg size, which has to do with a different question, which also people assumed for a while a certain way until it became clear, or at least possible, that our assumptions were all wrong. And on this I'll end for today. By the way, there's also discussion if a person ate two types of food for which the brocha achrona is different. If you ate a little bit of cheese and a little bit of, let's say, a cookie, each one is less than exayit, but together they're exayit. Some poskim, especially among Ashkenazim, say you make borei nefashot on that. There are poskim, including Rav Ovadia Yosef, who say that you don't make any brocha on that, since you didn't eat either one of them the right size. So there's no borei nefashot and there is no ala mechia. There's no brocha on either of them. And on this I'm going to conclude for today. If you like this video, please press like.